Hey guys, welcome back to another art lesson with the Bakersfield Museum of Art. Today we have a really cool art project that we're going to do, and we're going to be learning about using a grid as an artist's tool. Now artists use grids for a number of different reasons, but for today we're actually going to be using a grid to copy another artist's piece of work. We're also going to be using the grid to increase the size of the copied piece. And we're going to be using a piece from one of my favorite artists, Marion Osborne Cunningham. But before we delve into the project, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about her. Marion Osborne Cunningham was born in South Bend, Indiana on May 29, 1908. The Osborne family moved west shortly after Marion was born and settled in Bakersfield, California. From Bakersfield High School, she attended Santa Barbara Junior College, followed by art studies at Stanford University, Art Students League in New York City, and the California School of Fine Arts. Cunningham lived and worked in San Francisco during her adult life. Becoming well known as a pastel artist in the early 1930s, she soon branched out to other art forms such as serigraph and painting. She would be heavily influenced by her surroundings in San Francisco as well as her travels to South America. Marion Osborne Cunningham died unexpectedly of a brain tumor while in New York City on March 25, 1948. In honor of her, her parents would establish the Cunningham Memorial Art Gallery in 1956. This would later become the Bakersfield Museum of Art, which we know and love today. For today's project, we will be using this Cunningham piece from the Bakersfield Museum of Art's permanent collection. Before we get started, you're going to need just a few things. You'll need a pencil with eraser, some paper, colored pencils or crayons, a ruler, and a copy of an image you'd like to copy. To begin, we're going to create a grid over our sample image. To do this, we'll take our ruler and we're going to mark off equal distance points along each side. My image is 5 inches by 7 inches, so as you can see, I'm marking off 5 marks on the bottom and 7 inches along the side. This is so I get squares of my grid of about 1 inch by 1 inch. Now if you're using a different size image than me, then go ahead and adjust accordingly. You can make your squares as big or small as you'd like. We want to go ahead and take our next step by connecting all of those vertical and horizontal marks that we just made, and that's going to create our grid. Now the reason that we're creating this grid over our sample image is because it's going to work as a kind of a guide for when we do our drawing and we enlarge our sample image. To think of it a different way, you can think of each individual square as a smaller drawing or part of a whole. So instead of doing one large drawing, we're breaking this image down into multiple smaller drawings, which will help us recreate it with a fair amount of accuracy. So now in our next step, we're going to go ahead and make a larger grid on a fresh sheet of paper. And the steps to do this are very similar to what we do to our sample image. With our fresh sheet of paper, we want to go ahead and mark down along the sides where our grid marks or grid lines are going to be. And I am actually increasing the size of our sample image, so I've gone ahead and made these about 1.5 inches apart from each other. Now when you're creating your grid, you really want to keep your squares as equal size as possible. However, we are just practicing, so if they're a little bit uneven, don't worry too much about that. Now once you have your grid created, go ahead and compare it to the sample image that we're going to be copying, and find the amount of space on your grid that you'll be needing to transcribe the image. The extra squares, you're bound to have some extra squares that you won't be needing. You can just put a scribble through them or make some sort of marking that indicates you won't need that space. And now that we have the adequate amount of space sectioned off on our new grid, we can begin to carefully sketch the images that exist in these squares on our sample image. Now, I am certainly not the best sketch artist in the world, but that's okay. That's what actually a big part of why we're using the grid. It's to help us kind of break down the image, make things smaller, make things easier to translate from one image to another. And now just take your time, continue to sketch. You don't have to get every single detail, as we are going to color this image in just a few moments. But go ahead and continue your drawing. And hopefully your drawing is going well. Remember to use those individual squares to help you guide in your sketching. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and talk a little bit about coloring. Now hopefully the grid is helping you to create a fairly accurate copy of the image that we're trying to transcribe. Keep in mind it doesn't need to be perfect. This is just practice after all. So now with your sketch complete, we can move on to the coloring portion. You're going to want to do your best to match up the colors on your sample image as best you can. Continue to use your individual squares on your grid to line up your colors. If you don't have a huge selection of colors, that's okay. Just use what you have and feel free to sub in colors as you go. Now, as you'll see in a moment, certain portions of my sample image I'm going to actually be drawing in with the colored pencils that I'm using. And this is because the original sketch that I did was pretty much just a rough draft, kind of give me an idea of where things should be. As you can see, I'm adding in with my colored pencils the passenger as well as the conductor of the cable car. Go ahead and continue to color and add in more details, and I will check back in with you in just a moment. So with my coloring done, I've come up with this. Now side by side, we can see that it's a fairly similar drawing to the original. Maybe it's not perfect, but using that grid did help me a lot in maintaining the perspective and the proportions to the original. So, what do you think? I sure hope you got a lot out of this art lesson and that you continue to use the grid in future artworks that you create. Thanks once again for joining us here at the Bakersfield Museum of Art, and I hope that you join us again next time. Have a great day.